Shadow Minister Laura Pidcock.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. What an interesting debate this has been. I would like to congratulate all of those brave people who have come forward as whistleblowers. I think there's been so much agreement in this chamber, and I don't think it's just because there's so few of us here. Actually, I think it's because this is a serious issue that we all have a willingness to try and redress. Congratulations to the Right Honourable Member for North Norfolk for applying and being successful in securing this debate. His speech went to the very heart of the question, where people have done a very, very brave thing in reporting abuse. They are subject then to serious detriment. And rather than us concentrating, and this is what I've been amazed by in this debate, all of our energies and efforts on how the process can work best and how swift investigation can take place. Our energy is spent thinking about the whistleblowers' energy fighting and using their energy to fight saving their job, saving their relationships, saving their home, saving their mental health. And that important point on the effect, the knock-on effect, the corrosive effect on how everybody else feels about the system and their willingness to come forward and whistleblow. The case of Dr. Day and the numerous other whistleblowing cases are illuminating and show us that nearly 10 years into austerity and into huge cuts in the public sector and the long-term societal shift towards privatisation leads us to a couple of conclusions. Not only, of course, and I would say this as a Labour member, but that the cuts need to stop. They create dangerous working conditions, often in staffing shortages and skills shortages, and that privatisation of care is inappropriate, but that we need much, much more robust legislation in the face of these conditions. And the point was made, I think, repeatedly, it was a theme throughout many members' contributions, that power and unequal power distribution in the workplace is crucial, as with so many workplace issues, and legislation must redress that inequality. The member for Norfolk North and Ellesmere Port and Neston also crucially mentioned the necessity for non-regression clauses on EU directives pertaining to workers' rights post our withdrawal from the European Union. And the member for Thirsk and Walton highlighted an important trend that seems to occur when people whistleblow, in that rather than a full and thorough investigation into the claims, disciplinary procedures are used as a silencing mechanism. The member for Stirling paid tribute to the whistleblowers and stressed their selflessness. And I think that there probably is a burden that those people wish to relieve when, selfishly seeing that harm. But the member is absolutely right in that they are doing it to put an end to that harm or that misconduct that they see. There have been so many important contributions. The member for Oxford East talked about the very complex picture for constituents, about trying to understand who the prescribed person is. And if we find it confusing as members of Parliament, people with very, very busy lives who are not navigating these systems all of the time, it shows that there is actually a failure in the system. Madam Deputy Speaker, for many years, whistleblowers have not been given the protection they need or deserve and are left at the mercy of unscrupulous employers and state organisations. There are many victims of that negligence, and it is right, therefore, that the balance did start to shift from 1996 onwards, first with the Employment Rights Act and then with the Public Interest Disclosures legislation from 1998 onwards, and the revisions between 2013 and 15. However, we must be continuously asking in this place whether the protections and support we have for whistleblowers is inadequate in an ever-changing work and political environment. I therefore welcome this debate, and I'll shortly outline some of the principles behind my party's approach. There are currently 3 protections for those who have made a protected disclosure. Firstly, the right to not be subject to detriment as a result of whistleblowing. Secondly, that dismissal, where the principal reason for dismissal is the fact that the worker has made a disclosure, is automatically unfair. And thirdly, that where any other agreement seeks to prevent whistleblowing, that provision within the agreement is void. However, while these protections are important, they do not address the current failures in the law. The gaps allow many workers to fall outside of the scope of this legislation, as well as the failures to encourage the cultural changes, and I think that has been ever present in everybody's contributions, that will promote a culture of honesty and transparency in our workplaces, businesses and organisations, and a culture where whistleblowers are actually celebrated as that public good and forcing organisational change. For example, the failure to cover all workers because of the definition of worker used is a major flaw in the current legislation. That means, for instance, that many self-employed workers, which we know to be a much abused and contested category of employment, are not covered. It can't be right just because someone is employed on a contract which, in the first place, tries to absolve the real employer of their responsibility for the worker, they are also then denied the protections with regard to whistleblowing. Also excluded are most job applicants, and what this means is that whistleblowers can routinely suffer detriment through the recruitment process without any redress because they are known to be whistleblowers. This is surely an anomaly when job applicants have the right to be given protection under the Equality Act of 2010 on grounds of discrimination, harassment and victimisation. In addition, there is little attempt by the government in their approach to whistleblowing to encourage a proactive culture which not only supports the whistleblower themselves but creates the condition where the issues that they disclose are taken seriously in a timely manner and remedies are sought. Where is the requirement to investigate, and where are the mandatory enforceable and so important measures to support good practice and cultural change? UK law needs to be much more proactive, with early intervention being prioritised in order to protect both the whistleblower and the public. What is clear is that in recent years we've fallen well behind other countries on the issue. This is hardly surprising given that the government have an anti-worker stance on most issues, but it was thrown into sharp relief by the recent EU directive, which provides protection for self-employed and requires for organisations with over 50 employees to establish reporting channels. Now, I would like to say a few words on the principles that will guide a future Labour government, which hopefully isn't too far off in the future, on whistleblowing. Our key objectives in government will be to encourage people to raise concerns about wrongdoing, to ensure that such concerns are investigated in a timely fashion, appropriately, and that wrongdoing is rectified, to protect whistleblowers and others affected by whistleblowing, and importantly, to require employers to maintain appropriate procedures which facilitate whistleblowing. Under a Labour government, we would like it to be the legal duty of employers to protect whistleblowers, and that is enforced. And that means all workers, irrespective of the nature of their working relationship, whether they are paid or not, for example, interns or volunteers. Those protections should apply to people who make the disclosure, whether they are workers, former workers, people seeking work, and those undergoing training. And I think I'm right in saying that there is quite a consensus for that. I want to just talk about some of the patterns. As in my role as Shadow Minister, I've been thinking about the experience of the whistleblower and the themes that exist there. And the feedback reports that a typical journey of a whistleblower looks like this. If the worker is inexperienced at whistleblowing, there is uncertainty about what to do and who to tell, as has been mentioned. They often go to the immediate manager. The system response may be poor and include ignoring, minimising the issues, deliberate delays or hostility and intimidation. The system response may include reluctant, ineffective or biased, tokenistic investigations, deliberate attempts to exhaust and discourage the whistleblower with excessively lengthy and complex processes. Intimidation may increase with severity, with counter-allegations and formal disciplinary proceedings against the whistleblower or suspension and dismissal. And at this point, this isn't even the full journey. We have to remind ourselves that all they've done is report wrongdoing, misconduct or harm. The whistleblower's future employment prospects are in serious danger by this point. The whistleblower then escalates concerns externally to regulators. The system response is likely to be a full attack by this stage. If the whistleblower has not yet been dismissed, dismissal is almost certain, whether on trumped-up grounds or probably on lawful grounds, on breakdown of employment relationship under the some other substantial reason route. At this point, the whistleblower's whistleblowers' future employment prospects likely to be damaged beyond repair. They are unlikely to obtain equivalent employment in the same field again. Regulators, oversight bodies and government departments are often part of the problem and may turn a blind eye to the whistleblowers' disclosure and the fact they have been suppressed and victimised. Sometimes they will even outrageously orchestrate the harm and the suppression. And overall, the Public Interest Disclosures Act 1998 only kicks in after the whistleblower has been harmed and only allows the whistleblower, as has been mentioned, to sue for limited compensation long after the event and long after the public interest matters have been buried. And I'll start to finish by saying this. The government, Mr. Speaker, continue to say that it's premature to conduct a review of whistleblowing legislation. Quite the opposite. I think it is well overdue that this is what those who have been affected by the failures of legislation are telling us, and it surprises me that those of us on the opposition benches or the government benches think that that we know better than those people. The legislation in relation to whistleblowing is about prevention of disaster, Mr. Speaker. It's about prevention of death or wrongdoing. It is therefore appropriate that legislation is equally serious in response, with appropriate pre-detriment protections for those who blow the whistle and appropriate sanctions for those who are determined to discount, punish and harm the voice of the whistleblower. I'll just end with one question, because this motion talks about protection of broader people and widening the scope of the legislation. So job applicants, volunteers, interns, non-executive directors, public appointments, priests and ministers of religion, foster carers, members of the armed forces, all of those people are not afforded protections for whistleblowing under the current regime. Has the government any plans to extend the definition of worker to include these categories? Many thanks.